3 weeks from polling day, we're in Glasgow as Scotland's election campaign bursts into life, voters deciding the future of this country and potentially the fate of the entire United Kingdom. Good evening and welcome to a special Channel 4 News debate as Scotland decides. Politics here has been transformed in recent months by the arrival of Reform UK on the scene and a Labour government in Westminster that has crashed from landslide victory to deep unpopularity in under 2 years. The SNP, in power for almost 20 years now, has gone from electoral disaster in 2024 to being on the verge of an historic fifth term of government next month. And the Scottish Parliament could end up with a majority for independence, facing a UK government refusing to grant a referendum. Tonight, the US President, proud of his Scottish roots, of course, has hurled one of his social media volleys this way. As his blockade of the Strait of Hormuz sends our oil prices rising, he's telling Britain to turn to the North Sea for oil and gas. We'll debate that and much more. Joining us tonight, Scottish Conservative leader Russell Findlay. He's led the party for a year and a half, but one recent poll showed him possibly losing his seat this time around. Anas Sarwar has led Scottish Labour for 5 years. The party's plummeting poll rating led him to call for Keir Starmer's resignation recently. SNP leader John Swinney has been in government for almost 20 years, but was unexpectedly appointed Scotland's First Minister in 2024. The leader of reform in Scotland, Lord Malcolm Offord, was a Conservative donor and peer, but defected to reform in December. The co-leader of the Scottish Green Party, Gillian Mackay, was the first Green MSP elected in central Scotland, and Alex Cole-Hamilton has led the Liberal Democrats in Scotland since 2021. We'll hear from them all in a moment, but first, to set the scene, here's our Scotland correspondent, Catherine Sampson.
As 6 parties go head-to-head, John Swinney and the SNP appear to be defying political gravity after nearly 20 years at the top. As a new force pops up in Scottish politics. It's been an unusual campaign here. In Stirling, a city raised on battles, many were struggling to raise even a shrug about this fight.
We're all fed up with political parties, and I think that's what everybody's kind of feeling a bit, you know.
Can you name any of the leaders?
Probably not.
John Swinney has managed to restore some harmony to the SNP, steering them through recent scandals. But despite scrutiny over his long record in office, he's offering hope and sitting comfortably in the polls. Helping this is Scottish Labour's recent slump in fortunes since general election success. Anas Sarwar has called for Keir Starmer to quit. His own job could be on the line depending on May's result. Reform has risen.
Malcolm Offord.
With former Conservative donor Malcolm Offord now at the helm. Some polling suggests they could come second. Something that's not giving the Scottish Conservatives much to smile about as they fight being squeezed out. We're used to big personalities in Scottish politics, but unlike in the past, this doesn't feel like a popularity contest.
So when we measure kind of favourability towards each of the leaders, they all sit in a kind of negative column, and it does feel loveless. Yeah, it absolutely does, whichever way you look at it.
For voters on the ground, political point scoring can feel abstract. But the bigger picture here is about picking policies that will shape the lives of everyone in Scotland. You actually get to vote twice. The first vote on a purple ballot paper is to pick a candidate. It's quite straightforward. The person with the most votes wins, just like in UK Parliament elections. That selects MSPs for 73 different constituencies across Scotland, leaving 56 seats up for grabs in 8 different regions. This is where a second vote on a peach ballot paper comes in. This time you're voting for a party or independent candidate to represent your region in Scotland. There are 7 MSPs for each region, and they are elected by a form of proportional representation, something that's often good news for smaller parties. The pro-independent Scottish Greens and the Scottish Liberal Democrats are both campaigning hard for those second votes. With just over 3 weeks to go until the vote, no party's flying high, but the SNP is looking very comfortable. Will this be an election that reshapes Scottish politics, or will it simply maintain the status quo here?
So let's kick off with who else? Donald Trump, who has just posted on Truth Social today. Europe is desperate for energy, and yet the United Kingdom refuses to open North Sea oil, one of the greatest fields in the world. Tragic. Aberdeen should be booming. Drill, baby, drill. It's absolutely crazy they don't. John Swinney, is he right, or should he stay out of Scottish politics?
I don't agree with President Trump about drill, baby, drill. I think we've got enormous challenges about energy, but Scotland is an energy-rich country which is developing formidable renewable energy resources, and the reforms that the SNP's brought in over the last 19 years in office have made a huge difference in terms of the availability of renewable energy. The problem for Scotland, though, same problem that we had in the 1970s with oil, is that we don't see the economic benefit of the energy wealth of Scotland, and I want to make sure Scotland's energy is in Scotland's hands.
Russell Findlay, you like the idea of drill, baby, drill, but why are you pretending that it will have any impact on our domestic oil and gas prices?
As a starting off point, John Swinney is putting a big lie at the heart of his election campaign, that some idea that independence will suddenly, magically reduce the bills for hardworking Scots who are seeing their bills go up, when he's not produced a shred of evidence to support it. What we support is a sensible energy mix, and that starts with drilling for the oil and gas that we have in abundance in the North Sea. We also support the development of new nuclear. We've just seen today 8,000 new jobs being announced for Wales due to a new nuclear project that's got the green light. John Swinney's blocking that in Scotland.
But do you accept that drill, baby, drill does not bring down prices in Britain?
Every bit of gas produced by the UK is used in the UK.
So it doesn't bring down the price?
Whether or not you... Well, look at the volatility right now. Today, the IMF said that the United Kingdom would be the hardest hit of the G7 nations due to the events that are taking place in the Middle East. It is absolutely critical that the United Kingdom harnesses the oil and gas at its disposal, whether you like oil and gas or not, and I'm not sure which way John Swinney's facing today on that subject, but whether you like it or not, our country is going to need it for decades
Anas
to come.
Sarwar, I mean, you agree with him actually now, don't you? But you disagree with your own party in London and Ed Miliband.
Well, let me first of all say that if Donald Trump genuinely cared about livelihoods of people here in Scotland and across the UK, he and Benjamin Netanyahu would stop their illegal war in Iran, and they would try and get stability back in our energy market. The reality is he has no idea, no plan, and is trying to dictate to this country when he's made an absolute mess of it himself. On oil and gas specifically, a commitment was made to respect the licences granted by the last government. We should stick to that commitment. For example, for Rosebank
You told
and
Ed
Jackdaw.
Miliband.
Yes, I have, and we should stick to that for Rosebank and Jackdaw. We should continue the investments in renewables because it is a huge opportunity for us in Scotland. But actually, energy security is on the ballot on May the 7th because 24% of Scotland's electricity supply comes from nuclear sources, but bizarrely, we have a Scottish nationalist government that wants the investments, the jobs and the money and the security to go somewhere else.
But if
we will
Ed Miliband
end that
doesn't
ideological
listen
block.
to
We will
his
end that
colleague in
ideological
Scotland.
block and create thousands of jobs here in Scotland.
What is the point of having a Labour administration in Scotland if the Labour government in London doesn't listen?
Well, they're considering those two applications, and I hope they'll stick to that commitment. But let me just say one other thing. Your opening package said as if this election was inconsequential. This election is consequential. It is a choice, and after 20 years of SNP government, people in this country do want change. And what I'm saying is, you're giving John Swinney the SNP 20 years, give me 5, and let's fix the mess in this country rather than the arrogance we see from the SNP.
Gillian, Mackay, you disagree with all of them, don't you?
It's very clear that any new oil and gas exploration in the North Sea is not compatible with the climate crisis and actually won't bring anyone's bills down. Oil is traded on a global market, it's a global commodity. A price of a barrel of oil coming out of the North Sea is the same as anywhere else in the country, anywhere else in the world. What actually we need to see is a move to renewables, insulating prices for families across the country, making sure that we can bring those bills down. Decoupling the price of gas from electricity would also go a large way to making sure that we can bring bills down in the long term, but actually protect people from these global shocks. But we need to invest in in that. We should have had a just transition long ago. That transition has been unjust for a great many communities like mine in Grangemouth, and we need to make sure that we do invest in that in the long term to see good, well-paid, unionised jobs across the country and make sure that people's bills come down as a result.
Malcolm Offord, you're a Trump fan, aren't you?
I would agree with Donald Trump on this. Drill, Millie drill is what I would say. When the reality is, if you look at what's happened in the last 6 weeks with this war, the price of US domestic gas has not moved. Why is that? Because they have a ready-made supply of secure, affordable energy. We could have exactly the same in North Sea gas. Right now, we import 70% of our gas from Norway, from fields over the fence from ones we're shutting down. Even our Norwegian energy minister says that's daft. Now, here's the thing. On international markets, we can give licenses to get the North Sea gas as our transition fuel onto our shores for domestic purposes only. It does not need to go in the international gas market. And what this conflict has showed
Well, you'd force them.
is that we have
You'd
no
legislate,
energy,
would you?
we have no energy security. We're floating on a sea of oil and gas. We have no energy security, and we've also discovered that our armed forces don't have the sufficient capability either.
Well, sir, but how would you force private companies to...
You don't.
Send the
What you
gas
do is
here.
it's a commercial transaction. We know by talking to them.
on the international price?
No. We know that they can get the gas flowing within 12 months. We give them contracts on the basis of domestic supply only. It comes into the UK. We're a gas-based market anyway, and we then get our own cheap.
Well, John Swinney, why
gas.
don't you do that?
Well, what I consider is that if there are to be any developments in oil and gas, because we're going to be using oil and gas for the next 30, 40 years, and what we've got to make sure is that any developments are compatible with our journey to net zero, which I am wholly committed to. But the key issue for Scotland is about building up that renewable capability to lower prices, but to do that, we've got to make sure that energy system is in the hands of the people of Scotland, and we'll only get that if we've got the powers of independence. And the issue, the lesson for Scotland about the energy experience we've had about oil is that all of that benefit, all of that wealth was siphoned off from Scotland, and if we want to avoid the same happening with renewables, and I'm wholly committed to renewables, we've got to make sure Scotland's energy is in Scotland's hands.
You want to give it to China,
grievance
despite national security advice.
I want to
a First Minister that wants to reject national security advice, I'm sorry, means they're unfit to be First Minister.
Well, what I want to make sure is that Scotland actually benefits from the manufacturing capabilities and possibilities of renewables. But the Labour government has turned its back on £1.5 billion of investment in Scotland's renewable energy, and they've not given a credible explanation
just to clarify
why that's the case.
What John Swinney is saying is he wants the government in London to explain why the security services don't think this is a good idea to go ahead with this Chinese deal. Are you saying that if you were First Minister, you'd just accept whatever they say? You'd do what you were told?
Let me be unequivocal. If the national security advice is that we should not sell off an asset in our country, I will follow the national security advice. And I'm sorry, it sounds like John...
Isn't there a long record of national security advice?
It sounds like John has getting embraced by the conspiracy theorists, and to be honest, sounds like a bit of a crank, I'm not going to lie, by saying that they will deny national security advice and plough on ahead anyway. In the middle of a crisis where there's global instability, he will reject national security advice. It is not credible, it is not serious, and it's something for X rather than the First Minister's office.
So this point that Anas Sarwar makes, which is just another one of the many insults that he throws around because he's so desperate
National
in Scottish...
security is not an insult.
He throws around insults because he's so desperate in Scottish politics.
To win.
And he's very, very desperate because he's running out the road because the support is hemorrhaging from Anas Sarwar.
We'll see you on the 7th of May.
And what I want to make sure is that we have a credible explanation of what the UK government is setting out, and I've not had that explanation.
Okay.
And as First Minister, I'm entitled to do that.
Christian, no wonder people are turning away from this election. Scotland deserves better than this. We are so much better than this. As to the question, Donald Trump is a gangster, and Lord Offord doesn't just agree with him on drill, baby, drill. He agreed with him on the devastation of Iran, as did in the early days Russell Findlay's party. This has led to a global economic crisis with many, many deaths in the Middle East, a region in chaos. And the situation now where a once proud nation is being brought to the brink of war crimes. We need leadership that will stand up to him in the same way that Liberal Prime Minister in Canada, Mark Carney, did. And this is causing people real pain here in Scotland. Last week, I met a woman who was in tears in the Highlands because, like many other people in remote and rural parts of Scotland, she runs her home on heating oil. That doesn't have a price cap. She has already seen the cost of heating her home more than double in the last 6 weeks. We need an urgent package of measures right now. That's why the Liberal Democrats want to reduce fuel duty by 12 pence per litre, so it helps you at the pump. We want to see a price cap on fuel oil for remote and rural communities. And we want to be ready for when the price cap lifts in the summer, because, my goodness, we haven't driven down demand for oil and gas. That's why we're where we are right now. We need a national programme of insulation for every Scottish home as fast as possible.
Well, let's pick up the point you make on the war. I mean, Lord Offord, he's quite right, isn't he? I mean, had there been a reform government, British forces would be at war now.
That's not been said anywhere. What I think we should be saying is that Donald Trump, the reason that Mario Rubio...
You said that you wanted to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump.
Mario Rubio came straight out and said that it was imperative to make sure the Iranian regime, which is a monstrous regime, does not have a nuclear capability, a nuclear war capability.
Yeah, but you got this call wrong. You and the Conservatives
nuclear capability.
were both enthusiastic.
And that is something we
about
must
prevent.
In terms of energy, we account for less than 1% of global emissions. Okay, right now, it's more of a priority. We have safe and affordable energy, and we should be using our own North Sea gas.
It's really interesting that Malcolm Offord wants to get off the question of the Iran war as quickly as he can, because this is an illegal war that Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump are taking forward, which is causing mayhem in the Middle East and is bringing domestic problems right here. And the right thing to do is to say this is not an acceptable conflict, it is illegal, and we need to be using every device we have to de-escalate this conflict and get stability back in the Middle East.
But would you use every device you have as Scotland's First Minister to keep American forces, who you now clearly disagree with, off Scottish soil? I mean, you've had American jets fueling at Prestwick, you've had American submarines in Scottish waters, you've got more American planes coming here. Would you say no more of that because of what you say is an illegal war?
I don't have control over those issues. Those issues are determined by the United Kingdom government on defence, foreign affairs, aviation and security.
If you won independence, if you were the leader of an independent Scotland, would you stop American forces landing in Scotland now?
Well, I want an independent Scotland to be a member of NATO because I believe in collective security. I believe in European security as well. I also believe in the rule of international law.
Would you stop the planes landing in Prestwick?
And I think that's been broken in relation to the Middle East by what the United States and Israel have done. So you cannot go along with the breaking of international law if you want to uphold international law, and that principle applies to everything I do as First Minister.
Stop landing in Scotland? If you think they're breaking international law, it's a clear question, yes or no.
If there's any breaking of international law, then there should be no use of the military infrastructure of this country.
The question with John Swinney is, does he think that Scotland is safer and more secure by breaking up the United Kingdom?
Well, I think Scotland would be. I think Scotland would be safer because what worries me about the current situation is the North Atlantic gap above Scotland is not being adequately policed because the defence policy of the United Kingdom is not focused in the right priority.
Russell Findlay,
we're investing hugely in nuclear weapons and not in conventional protection.
There's a very good reason that the Iranian regime, the disgusting Iranian regime, supports Scottish independence, and that's because they know that Scotland and the United Kingdom would be fundamentally weaker if John Swinney ever got his way.
You'd have taken us into war, wouldn't you? That's the truth.
Absolutely not. What we have said is that it's entirely right that UK military and UK bases should be used.
What about all that stuff Kenny Bainlock came out with about taking out the Archer, not the arrows?
Well, look,
who's the Archer in that scenario?
It's critical that Iran is deprived of acquiring nuclear capability. I don't think anyone here thinks that's a bad idea. What we want to see, though, because of the impact the escalating war is having in the Middle East is having on the domestic energy prices, both home energy and at the pump, is a cessation of the hostilities. What's happened is Trump's gone in without any apparent endgame, and now we are all paying the price for that, and we need to ensure that what we do is get on with
I think what this demonstrates, Christian, is that Donald Trump is no longer a trustworthy ally, and as such, until America regains its senses, until there are reasonable heads in the White House, we need to turn to our European neighbours for a stronger defensive alliance.
Okay.
And as a Lib Dem, you would expect me to say that we should be closer to Europe, but we absolutely do.
Gillian Mackay, I mean, you could answer the question I was asking John Swinney very straightforwardly, couldn't you? You want the Americans out.
Absolutely, we do. We can't be complicit in war crimes other places in the world. We've seen from Donald Trump in the last week alone that he's willing to bomb civilian infrastructure to get his own way. Forceful regime change in the last few decades has never brought anything good across the world, and bombing other people's children doesn't seem to be a particularly good way forward
Do
either.
you not
which
worry
is
when
happening.
Russian submarines are off the coast of Scotland that if you wave bye-bye to an American security alliance, you will leave Britain very vulnerable?
But that's actually where we should be working more closely with Europe. You can't negotiate with a rogue leader on that world stage. He's clearly changing his mind at the drop of a hat, deciding from day to day who it is he's going to go and target next. We've had him kidnap the leader in Venezuela. We've had him bomb Iran. He's arming Israel's genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. When is enough for some of the parties on this panel?
Anas Sarwar, let me bring you in here. I mean, you called for Starmer to consider his position. Isn't the truth that he has been in tune with the British public when it comes to the Iran war? He's probably had his best period in government.
Look, I'm going to be open and say just because I disagree with someone on a number of things doesn't mean I have to disagree with them on everything. I think they have taken the right approach when it comes to Iran. And let's be really clear, the person to blame and the two people to blame for this crisis are Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, who went in without a plan, started an illegal war, and I say that as someone that has zero sympathy for the Iranian regime and the risk it also poses.
But you still think he should go, given how insecure and febrile the world is right now?
I've stated my position. I don't recoil from that position, but I'm spending the next 3 weeks trying to change the First Minister in this country because I think that makes a massive difference to the lived experiences of people in this country. Can I just make one point about defence? Our defence infrastructure in Scotland is crucial. Take our shipbuilding industry not far from here on the Clyde. Because of the actions taken by the UK and because of the partnership with Norway, that's a £10 billion deal coming to the Clyde, thousands of jobs, secured for a generation, something that had to be welcomed, dragging from John Swinney and the SNP. But actually, why are they not backing that up by investing in the skills required on that site? As an example, a third of the workforce at any given time in Rosyth and on the Clyde come from short-term workers from the Eastern Europe or the Philippines. The average salary about £40,000 to £60,000. That's why we will invest in the skills on those sites for our young people so they can get those skills and get those jobs. Why the SNP don't want to invest in the skills required for that shipbuilding industry and welding is beyond belief.
Malcolm Offord, I mean, you said, Trump's right. Have you not been at all embarrassed by what he's been saying? His comparisons to Jesus, his threats of genocide.
I wouldn't agree with quite a lot of what Donald Trump says. But
You want to roll out the red carpet with Donald Trump.
What we're dealing with here is the US is our biggest and oldest ally. The world is more unsafe than it's ever been. We don't have the capability to defend ourselves on our own. We should be supporting our biggest ally. Doesn't mean to say that we are committing any of our troops.
So you just go along with whatever they say.
We should be, in this particular objective, to make sure the Iranian regime does not have a nuclear bomb. I think we should be supporting America.
But Christian, it's very important to say that Donald Trump is not America and America is not Donald Trump. And the old and special relationship we have with our friends across the Atlantic is big enough and old enough to withstand the measured criticism of concerned friends and politicians this side of the Atlantic. This relationship will outlive his presidency. We just need to survive it.
Well, we want to talk about the impact of the war on the cost of living, which, of course, is the biggest issue everybody says is the one that they are going to vote on when it comes to these elections. And the IMF has warned that out of all the world's advanced economies, the shock of the Iran war will hit the UK the hardest at a time when many people are already struggling with the rising cost of living. Malcolm Offord, Lord Offord, you want to cut tax, which would put more money in people's pockets. But you want to take money out of about half of Scotland's pockets by cutting welfare. You're not really going to leave people better off, are you?
So the reason why we've got this issue where we've got the worst economy in the G7 is because our energy bills are too high, our tax is too high, our borrowing is too high, our economy is not growing. Simple as that. So you want to fix this, we need to take steps to do that. Reform will bring down the price of energy. We've discussed that already by getting North Sea gas flowing. We'll do that immediately. Now, tax, we need to cut people's tax because they're overburdened, overtaxed.
But which benefits will
more
you cut
money into their pocket
to pay for it?
And it's only 3% of the Holyrood budget that John Swinney runs in Holyrood, 72 billion.
Which benefits will
only
you cut to pay for
3%,
it?
and we can get that from duplication, waste, the quangos we've talked about. All the parties are
So
now
like
talking
the people
about
who
a
check to see if
bonfire
the
of the
hospitals are
quangos.
clean.
We can
Malcolm,
talk
you're
about
talking
getting
about
rid of
the
waste.
people who are
We
checking
can
our
talk
hospitals.
about getting rid of ideological spend without even going near frontline services.
Which benefits?
I said to you
cut?
without even going
Are
near
you saying? Are
frontline
you
services.
saying that you? Are you saying you
I
wouldn't
said
cut
we
any
can get
benefits?
3% of
not
the budget.
serious.
I said we can get 3% of the budget cut.
It's just
Anybody
not
who runs a business can cut their cost by 5% without any relevance to the top line. This is only 3%.
John Swinney.
Not serious.
People have got to be really aware of the danger of voting for reform because Nigel Farage, who's running the reform campaign, he was in Scotland yesterday and today, he's the one behind Lord Offord. He wants to privatise the National Health Service, and the only way to stop reform having any say in the running of the government of Scotland is to elect an SNP majority, because out of all these parties, I will have nothing to do with reform. I will in no way collaborate or cooperate with reform in the Scottish Parliament. I will lock them out by securing a majority. And I want to make sure that we've got a government that's on Scotland's side, that's able to focus on improving the National Health Service, delivering the support to tackle the cost of living, and to make sure that people who need our support in society are
Anas
properly
Sarwar,
protected.
I mean, you have a catalogue of failures of 20 years of SNP government that you can reel off, I'm sure. You know, from the NHS waiting lists to the A9 still not being expanded.
We could take up the entire 45 minutes of the debate talking about John Swinney's failures for 20 years.
Yeah, but they're on course to win again.
That's up to the good people of this country. John might want to arrogantly predict this election is done and dusted. I don't believe that's right. This far out from the last general election, pollsters were predicting that Labour was only going to win 12 Scottish Labour MPs. We went on to win 37 Scottish Labour MPs, and John won less than 10. It's the people of this great country that will decide. But the important question you asked was about the cost of living, because understandably, people right across Scotland and indeed across the UK will look at what's happening on their screens. They'll see what's happening at the petrol pumps. They'll see the kind of reports that come from the IMF, and they'll be really worried about their jobs, and they'll be really worried about their household bills. And the commitment I'm making, that if I'm First Minister, I will do more than just use the failures and the illegality of the actions of Netanyahu and Trump to simply point the finger of blame somewhere else and refuse to take action here at home. So as First Minister, if this instability continues, if the war continues, we will have an £100 million emergency package that will include bailouts for energy-intensive companies so we can protect jobs. It'll be bulk buying fuel so we can drive down prices at the petrol pumps. It'll be grants and loans for low-income households to help pay their bills. It will convene the supermarkets so we can drive down the prices of staple items when supermarkets are making huge profits at this moment in time. And fifth, we will redeploy the civil service so they're out there in communities maximising people's incomes. For example, those pensioners that aren't taking their entitlements, or all those families.
There is now
who are
no
entitled
question
to
of
up to
tax cuts.
£3,000.
You said you'd like to reduce tax.
Well,
there is now no question
in our
of
manifest-
that, given the huge hole in
Well,
public
in our
finance.
manifesto yesterday, we said all our commitments were not contingent on tax cuts. We have set an ambitious growth target. If we meet that growth target, we'll cut tax, but we are not raising tax in the next Parliament, because I do not think it's fair that if you earn £33,500 in Scotland, you're expected to pay more tax here than anywhere else in the UK.
Gillian,
that
Mackay,
is not the people with the broadest shoulders.
Do you think tax should go up for some people?
So we're pretty unapologetic that tax pays for good things that we all value. They pay for doctors and nurses and the public services that everybody values. We've done some work over the last session to make sure that income tax is fairer, but we now need to shift that lens away from income to wealth and make sure that we tax that appropriately. One of the ways that we want to do that is introducing an Amazon tax on big distribution centres outside of towns and cities to reinvest in our high streets, making sure that we can support those those businesses that mean so much to communities across the country, that are part of the social fabric of towns and cities, as well as being businesses. But we can also raise the tax intake across the country by increasing the amount of childcare that we provide. Investing in childcare means that more women in particular can go back to work, making sure that we then have a higher income tax take, but that has to come with the right amount of flexibility. On other bits on cost of living in particular, we want to make sure that everybody across the country has free bus travel, making sure that they can get around their community.
And you'd pay for that how?
By taxing wealth, by making sure those with the broadest shoulders pay their fair share. And there are plenty of people across the country who are more than willing to do that. We need to get away from talking about tax as a bad thing and actually about an investment in society, an investment in the NHS, in teachers, in all those other things that we all rightly talk about with a great deal of affection.
Russell Findlay, I mean, you know, Gillian Mackay says tax isn't a bad thing. And in truth, the way the Conservative government taxed people, that must be what you think too.
Scotland's taxpayers deserve a break. John Swinney's SNP government this year has imposed additional income tax on top of what people pay as being part of the United Kingdom of £1.8 billion. You have to be earning just over £33,000 in Scotland and you're paying more income tax. And at the same time, the Social Security bill has gone through the roof and it continues to rise. All independent financial experts say that it's unsustainable and it's evidently unfair. What John Swinney doesn't want to talk about is the fact there's a £5 billion gap at the heart of the Scottish public finances.
Yes, and growth has just been downgraded by half a point.
That's the reality, right? So what we've
So
done
you're not going to be able to cut tax?
Yes, we are, because we are the only party here who have actually produced a costed manifesto showing where we'd make those cuts and showing how we could encourage people to work, incentivise work, make work pay, rather than constantly turning the screw, which is all John Swinney wants to do.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Let me say, first of all, Liberal Democrats won't put up tax at this election. We think actually the social contract is broken. People don't trust government, the Scottish government, with their tax money.
You backed the SNP budget. You backed the £1.8 billion rise.
You can see the crisis in our ferries fleet, which has laid our island communities low over the Easter holiday recess, when they should have been expecting tourists to come and spend their money there. Our island and coastal community have been crippled by SNP mismanagement. This was a ferry that Nicola Sturgeon launched to great fanfare in 2017 with painted-on windows, and it still has never left dry dock. This is the measure in microcosm of the SNP's incompetence because of their lack of focus on the day job.
What we've delivered for Scotland is improvements in a whole host of different areas. The expansion of early learning and childcare, the delivery of higher attainment in our schools, falling waiting times. Alex Cole-Hamilton said a moment ago that the social contract is broken. What the social contract involves in Scotland is people having access to free prescriptions, students not having to pay tuition fees when they go to university, delivering the improvements in people's lives through the delivery of improvements in the public services. And that's what our tax pays for. So people, the majority of taxpayers in Scotland are paying less in tax than if they lived in the rest of the United Kingdom. And as a consequence, they have access to a whole range of different benefits on free prescriptions, on free tuitions, and on investment in the public infrastructure of Scotland. That's what an SNP government has delivered.
But you're not
and I'm proud of the record the SNP
so
government
both the
has
Greens
achieved.
and the SNP will give you a hit list, a greatest hits of all the freebies they can give away. Let me tell you, these things are not free. Everything costs money. It's just a matter of who's paying for it. If you want to collect more tax revenue, you want to encourage more companies to be successful in Scotland. You want more high-earning people in Scotland. You need to therefore incentivise people to come and live here, and that's what we will do at Reform UK.
We're going to move on now to discuss an issue that historically wasn't divisive in Scotland, but has become an increasingly bitter debate in recent years. Scotland has no control over immigration. It's entirely in the hands of the UK Home Office. But the Scottish Government has long argued it should have the power to determine who comes into the country in order to meet the specific needs of the workforce. John Swinney, immigration has become a divisive issue in this election campaign, and you have said that Lord Offord is unfit to be First Minister. Can you explain why?
Because of the type of message and the and the whole line of argument that's been peddled by Reform. The first billboard that Lord Offord had in this election campaign was a billboard that essentially incited tension and division in our society based on the issue of race and immigration. And I want to make clear that I take the view that migrants are welcome in our country. We've got a history of migration as a country, and our country has been strengthened by the welcome that we've extended to people as a consequence. We also need to face the realities that we don't have a big enough working age population. Our universities in Scotland are agreed with the government that we need to make sure that more people are able to come to Scotland to contribute to our higher and further education systems, and that's been blocked by the actions of a United Kingdom government. So this debate has been weaponised by people like Lord Offord and Nigel Farage, and I want to make clear I'll have none of it.
So immigration is now a top 3 issue for Scottish people. And this issue is not being created by Reform. What Reform is doing is honestly reflecting the views of local Scottish people, especially in our working class communities, who feel they're being pushed to the back of the queue. And it's simply not fair. And the idea of that billboard was to say that the illegal asylum seekers, they come into England, but they come to Scotland. They come to Glasgow.
What could you do about it?
Why? Because the SNP have cut something called the local connection rule, giving priority need to local people. The result is that today, Glasgow's got 1% of the UK population, houses 6% of UK asylum seekers, which is costing 55 million in temporary accommodation.
That's Glasgow City Council, isn't it?
Hang on, which is 15% of Glasgow council tax. We cannot afford that. It's too much and it has to stop.
And this is exactly the weaponisation of this issue that I'm talking about. It is designed to stoke division in our communities.
But doesn't Glasgow City Council say that it can't afford the housing bill that it has?
Correct.
Because of the number of asylum
black hole.
Glasgow City Council have asked the Home Office to take an orderly approach to the financial support for all of this issue. That's what Glasgow City Council has asked for. But the way this issue is being weaponised by Lord Offord, Nigel Farage and Reform is deeply damaging to cohesion in our society. And I just want to make clear that my government will have nothing to do with all this.
Anas Sarwar.
Look, immigration has been good for this country. Do we have a broken immigration system that has to be fixed? Yes. And do we have to give fairness in the system? Absolutely, if we're going to take people with us. But can I just say something else? This is not an issue that Lord Offord's talking about because he wants to fix the mess. He's doing it deliberately to divide us. And I've got to say it's pretty insidious of John Swinney, who rightly call out the, frankly, racism of Reform and then try to pretend that the person they target with tens of thousands of pounds of ads is somehow the one that's going to do a secret deal with them. I can understand why he politically says it, but he should morally take a look in the mirror. Because let's look at what Reform have done. Thousands of pounds of adverts questioning my loyalty to my country. They've also had those billboards where they target children in Glasgow. And more than that, he says they're not a racist party. Farage yesterday says they're not a racist party. One of his candidates wants to deport my children. Where do you want them to go, Malcolm? One of your candidates wants my children deported. Where do you want them to go? And how dare you use that as a cover for politics, John? Where do you want my kids to go, Malcolm?
This is the third time on national TV you called me a racist.
Where do you want my children to go?
This does not square with you coming up to me at the start of this campaign, bouncing up to me in Paisley Town Hall and saying we need to work together, Reform and Labour, to remove the SNP.
Utter nonsense.
This does not square.
The racist ads. Let's talk about those racist ads, and let's talk about you wanting to deport my children. Don't you try and jump on this, John, to try and play politics. This is a moral issue. Where do you want my children to go, Malcolm, when one of your candidates say they should be deported?
There's no prospect of you or your family or children being deported. We're talking about people who come to this country illegally, who are getting homes and healthcare in front of our own local people.
Can I just be clear with you about what you want to do, Lord Offord? If you say it is wrong for Glasgow City Council to offer housing to anybody, what are you proposing?
Not to anybody. It's been given in priority to people who just arrived here.
Well, priority is debated. They go onto the list like anybody else. What are you suggesting they do instead? Send them away? Leave them on the street?
They should not be coming here in the first place. The incentives
they
are too
are
good.
Here. What would you do about it?
Because the incentives are too good. And
a lot of
when
these people are people who have already been cleared. They've gone through the system.
What's happened
They're
is
no longer asylum
they come to England, they get indefinite right to remain, I think, on a pretty dubious basis, and then come to Scotland because the SNP says everyone's welcome to free housing and free healthcare, and that is
What
not
are you
fair.
suggesting
And that
happens
is
to them?
not fair for local people.
What are you suggesting happens to them?
I'm saying that we should restore the connection, the local connection rule. Scotland should go back to take.
Yes, so what happens
we'll always
to
take
the
its fair
refugees
share.
who were there
We'll always
saying,
take
"I'm
its-
homeless"?
Lord Offord.
We'll always take its fair share of genuine
Christian,
refugees,
Lord
but it
Offord.
should not become the dumping ground here in Scotland.
Christian,
Will you
These
sack
are-
your candidate
these are
then? Will you
human
sack your
beings.
candidate then?
These are human beings
Exactly.
that we're referring to
Exactly.
Scotland as a dumping ground for
Exactly.
them. I think that just shows the insidious nature behind this from Reform.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous. And the fact that a candidate has said that about Anas's children is deplorable. And we should all be collectively standing against that because that's awful. What we need to do... Migration has been a good thing for Scotland. We need that inward migration.
Legal
we need to be a welcome...
Legal
We-
migration
we-
is good for Scotland. Legal migration,
Right.
controlled
Humans
migration.
are... Hang on.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Humans are not illegal.
Malcolm Offord talks about cohesion, but he's trying to divide our country. And,
No, I'm
and by so
reflecting
doing,
what's
I think he
happening here.
underestimates
No.
the people of this
I'm
great
reflecting
country.
what's happening.
Lord Offord, you've spoken enough. Frankly, I mean, Liberal Democrats care passionately about the small boats crisis. That's why we want 2,000 extra caseworkers to clear down the backlog. But immigration is actually part of the solution to so many of Scotland's problems. I met a woman
care
in the
and
Highlands last month who has been in hospital for a year past the point at which she was told she could go home because there are no care workers in the far north of Scotland. That's been caused by Brexit. We need skilled migrants to come in. Because without so doing, it causes an interruption in flow, which means that there's 2,000 Scots on any given night stuck in our nation's hospitals. It causes a problem in A&E. People can't be discharged from the main hospital.
Okay.
And it's the crisis on our NHS.
Russell Findlay.
Costing the NHS £1.2 million a
Who
day.
are you aligning with here?
Legal and managed immigration is necessary. We need to attract people to come to this country. But it's evident, and the reason it is such an important issue to so many people out there tonight is because they can see the impact it's having on places like my home city of Glasgow. The mass illegal immigration of people coming to this country. Even John Swinney's own SNP council has called for a pause, and that's because what they did is three or 4 years ago, they suspended the need for a local connection rule, which saw the number of applicants go from 30 in 1 year to almost 1,300 a year later. And I see the impact this is having on Glasgow and on the services and the resentment it's causing among people in the city.
So do you
And what they
agree
shouldn't be-
with
what
Lord
they
Offord
shouldn't be
that,
called-
No longer the party
the
that
Scottish
reshaped-
government should ban
What-
the idea of local connection?
What they should do, if they want to complain about having too many immigrants coming to Glasgow, they're the ones that created that particular set of circumstances. But what John Swinney should do, if he's keen to attract more people to Scotland, more people that will contribute to the economy, he should do something about the income tax, for example. He should focus on the issues he's got at his hand. But instead, he wants to make it about something
Sorry, I don't mean
This
getting rid of local
narrative-
connection. I mean getting rid of the ability to remove it, which is what you're arguing.
In these exchanges, we've seen vividly the divisive rhetoric of Lord Offord and Reform and what that is doing in our society and what that's designed to do in our society, to pit people against other people in our country.
No.
And Scotland is
Absolutely.
not. And Scotland is not a country.
Reflecting the reality,
Scotland
John.
is not a country like that. But the other
Is
thing
there
that
any
Lord,
limit
but the
to
other thing that
immigration?
Lord Offord has said is that Anas Sarwar is willing to work with Reform, and I think
His
we need to have
candidates
that.
want to
I think we-
deport my
I think we-
children,
I think
John.
we- well,
Take a moral
I
look
think-
in the mirror
listen,
about the kind
listen.
of argument you're making.
Okay.
They spent
I-
tens of
I-
thousands of pounds
I-
questioning my loyalty to
Yes.
this country. Take
And
a
you know-
moral
and you
look
know-
in the mirror,
and you
John.
know-
All right.
Don't
and you
try and
know
pick
well-
politics.
and
It's
you know-
beneath
you
you.
know- you
It's
know-
beneath you to suggest that those that are suggesting that my children should be deported
Yes.
are the ones I'm going to do some kind of...
And I don't,
right.
and I don't
Look
understand.
at yourself
and I don't,
in the
and
mirror,
I don't
John.
understand why you are prepared to entertain
Okay, I'm gonna
some
move
route
on.
into the First Minister's office.
We're repeating
supported by
ourselves a little bit here
Reform.
now.
I will have none
You've
of it.
become a crank.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on. After the break, with polls suggesting a solid majority for parties who back independence, could this election lead to the end of the United Kingdom as we know it? Now, welcome back to Glasgow, where we are debating the issues that will determine the outcome of the Scottish Parliament elections with the 6 leaders of Scotland's main political parties, and with the latest polls showing an almost certain majority for independence supporting parties. Is a second independence referendum back on the cards? It's been 12 years since the last one, when Scotland narrowly said no thanks. Is the Westminster government likely to say something similar to the idea of having another vote? They have that power. I want to ask the unionists here quickly, we don't have a lot of time, if Scotland, Alex Cole-Hamilton, elects a majority independence supporting parliament, should the London government grant a referendum?
I hope not. And I'd probably knock more doors than anybody else on this panel. And nobody is raising this as an issue. They're concerned about why Scottish education isn't what it used to be, why health is...
But you don't think that the democratic outcome of this election should mean London grants a referendum?
No,
Fine.
and let me finish by saying this.
That's clear. I just want to get to the bottom of this quickly. Russell Findlay, same question to you.
The people of Scotland said no decisively
12 years
2014, indeed. And from day one...
What were you doing 12 years ago?
I was not a politician back then. I was
Things have changed, haven't they?
An ordinary voting member of the public. And I naively thought that once the people of Scotland had had their say, the SNP would respect democracy. But of course, from day one, they never have. And the idea that now independence is no longer a threat, these other parties want to just wish it away.
Okay.
Reform pretending to be a unionist party.
Anas Sarwar,
they are the biggest
are you a
supporters
Democrat?
of this.
Do you think
SNP.
Scotland is in a voluntary union?
It is a voluntary union, but
So how does
the
it leave?
outcome of this election is not going to be a majority SNP government. It's going to be, the question is whether the SNP stay in power or not.
No, not
whether they
SNP
get a
majority. The
or
question,
not.
if the SNP and the Greens together,
I also-
who are both pro-independence,
I also don't
have a majority.
Well, I also don't believe that will be the result either. And in
If it
actual fact,
is-
if
if it is, what should the London government do?
13% of people said independence is a priority in this election. 50% said the NHS. But
If that is
this
the
debate's
result,
not talked about the NHS.
What should
I'll
the
focus on
government
the
of
issue.
London do about another referendum?
Well, we are going to focus on bringing our country together to change it.
So would you just say no?
I'm making a direct appeal to
Yeah,
people.
just say no.
I'm not asking people to change their mind on independence. I don't support independence or a referendum, but I want to bring our country together to fix the SNP mess, get the basics right, and build a better future. And if, after that, people decide at some point in the future a different final destination, so be it. But this election is about guaranteeing opportunities for our kids,
when you say
fixing our NHS,
sometime
and
in the
making life
future,
more affordable.
You're not giving us a route, are you?
Well, this election's for the next 5 years.
We need to move on.
If there is a pro-independence majority in the Parliament, should the London government grant a referendum?
No. And I don't believe John Swinney wants to do that anyway. I don't think he's serious about it. He just trots this out every 5 years because there's nothing else in his manifesto to interest anybody in
But
Scotland.
you just ignore the Democratic will.
He doesn't want to do it because he hasn't solved the four big questions. He can't talk about pensions, borders, currency or defence. If he'd moved the ball forward on those 12 in the last 12 years, he may actually be serious. But his own people now realise he doesn't actually want this referendum.
Isn't that true, John Swinney? You wouldn't win a referendum right now.
Well, the polls show just now that there is the opinion in Scotland is finely balanced between yes and no, with yes shown in most of the polls this year to be in a winning position. Now, I've made it very clear.
I don't know which polls you've been looking at.
Most of them are saying that. And I've made it clear that if an SNP majority is elected, I will secure a referendum on Scottish independence because that's the democratic right of the people
There
of
hasn't been a
Scotland
poll
to
over
control their
50%
own future.
in favour of
Yes,
This has been the focus of your
there has been.
government.
There's been a number of them, Christian.
This has
And
been
what I want to make sure is the democratic right of the people of Scotland to decide their own future is determined by the people of
this has been
Scotland
holding
and
Scotland
not
back,
vetoed by
Christian, if I may.
Westminster politicians.
Very
That's what my
briefly.
campaign is about.
Christian, this has been holding Scotland back. Across the dashboard of public policy, there are warning lights.
You have had your turn on this, Alex. I want to bring in the Greens.
So we are clear that a pro-independence majority in Parliament should be enough for a referendum. We've had that over the course of the last session, and actually we should be growing that this session. We need to make sure that we're living in those early days of a better nation. I voted no in 2014. I was sold many of the mistruths, shall we say, of many of the parties around this panel. We were told we could stay in the EU, a great many other things, and all we got was Boris and Brexit instead. We're in a fundamentally different place to 2014. There will be many young people voting for the first time in these Scottish Parliament elections that never got their say. And if the Westminster government continues to deny Scotland that democracy, despite a pro-independence majority, they are denying that to the people
Lord
of
Offord,
Scotland.
isn't there a strange thing here where as in 2024, it was reform that created the massive Labour majority for the whole of the United Kingdom? It is reform's appearance in Scotland that is ensuring at the moment that the SNP is going to win these elections. It's a curious outcome, isn't it?
Well,
that your party is putting them in power.
So reform,
I mean, isn't it a wasted vote, voting reform?
No, well, Reform UK has gone from 7% to 20% in the vote in the last 2 years. Why is that? because people have lost faith in the Conservative Party, who are no longer a national party anyway, and the Labour's collapsing because of what Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer's done in London. So
John Swinney,
at the end of the day, we are
just finally,
Reform can
the
just
same
stop
point to
change.
you.
Come on.
They are your political best friends, aren't they? At the moment? They are the ones who are putting you in a position to win.
I've made it absolutely clear tonight I'm going to stand up to Reform and everything they represent, because they do not represent the country that I've served for the last 19 years.
Reform can just stop change. If you want change, there's only one route on May the 7th, and that's by voting Scottish Labour.
A vote for Reform's only going to make an SNP government more likely. They're fielding pro-independence candidates. They've produced a blueprint for another referendum, and they cannot be trusted on the union.
And while everybody else has told you that they're not Reform, what we want to deliver is lowering people's bills, free bus travel across the country for people to make sure they can get around their communities easier, and investing in childcare to make sure particularly women can get back into the workforce so that families have that money back in their pockets and, crucially, they have that choice.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Scotland deserves change, but it has to be change with fairness at its heart, whether that's on tackling the NHS crisis, driving down the cost of living, fixing education and getting Scotland moving again. And we can win. In 10 constituencies across the country, we're on the verge of winning against the SNP, but wherever you are, a vote for the Lib Dems on that second peach-coloured regional ballot will elect a Liberal champion who'll fight for you and for your community.
I mean, is it not weak that you have to rely on the list?
No, not at
That you have to keep saying vote for us on the
well, look,
paper because you're going to lose in the constituency?
People were saying this about the Lib Dems. People were saying this about the Lib Dems. People were saying this about the Lib Dems in 2024, just weeks before. And look, we had the best election for the Liberals in these islands in 100 years. We trebled our seats in Scotland. We overtook the Tories.
We must leave it there.
We're going to do it again.
Thank you all very much indeed.